Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. Be sure to check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com or visit one of their four locations, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, or their newest location in Knoxville at 8018 Kingston Pike. That's across from Trader Joe's. And be sure to check them out, find out what they're all about. With all the organic teas and the body care items, all the essential oils, everything to help you with some of your ailments and things you're dealing with natural products and organic remedies. That is Smoky Mountain Organics. Remember, be sure to mention Volquest.com if you're in the store, and you'll get 15% off of your total purchase price. With Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us for this mailbag installment of the podcast. Plenty of questions to get to, and we will start right out of the gate, AP, with...
Hold on a minute. Hold on. Before we get going, we got to know, do they have an essential oil that makes you warmer? Because if so, I'm getting you that for Christmas.
They do have all kinds of products. I'm not sure if they have a heat related. I've got my battery powered thermal shirt, so I'm pretty much okay. AP, I'll bring that bad boy out 1st of October while the rest of y'all are in shorts and flip flops. I'll have my battery powered thermal shirt on. I'll be in good shape.
And a couple of hot pockets in it.
No, there's no doubt I'll have some hand warmers, toe warmers. There might be a heater underneath the counter in the radio booth as well.
Can't you see a pack of smoke sitting on Hubs' head underneath his toboggan?
Sometimes I wish my hair was on fire just to warm myself up, because Kessling likes to keep the windows open all the time, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard of.
Him and Packer, 1A and 1B. I mean, the two peas in the pod they are.
Yeah, gotta have your window open so you can hear that natural crowd sound out there. All right, here we go. Let's go to first question out of the gate. This is from E. Schaefer 92. Is Milton's struggles more of an accuracy issue or a timing thing, or maybe a combination of the two? QB coaches say accuracy is the hardest thing to teach. I guess he's trying to hint around Rob Lewis. Is what we saw out of Joe Milton in game one, quarters 3 through 4, fixable? I think is kind of the direction he was going there.
Yeah, I think it's fixable. I'm no quarterback guru, don't get me wrong, but I'm not ready to say the sky's fallen after one game. Did he play well? No, for the final 3 quarters, he did not play well at all. But, Josh Heupel's making a lot of money to coach and has a good track record with quarterbacks. So I would think it's fixable. I thought the bigger thing to me was just not seeing the field and missing.
I agree with this.
Missing a lot of guys that we have a better angle than Joe Milton does, and people aren't running at us from up to the press box from that vantage point. But I thought there were some times where he missed some chances for some really big gains down the middle.
I agree. I think it's more seeing the field than it is accuracy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that too. Here's the other thing I wonder, Austin. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how much is the receivers, were they in that starting in that second quarter move, where maybe they not on the same page with some of the route adjustments the receivers have to make, and Milton seeing those route adjustments, or the receivers making those route adjustments? And I say that because Heupel keeps talking about entire passing game, and I don't think he's trying to protect necessarily Joe Milton. I do think that there's a situation where there's some error here in the passing game that falls at the feet of the receivers some too, and not just the 2 drop passes by Jalen Hyatt, Austin.
No, that's exactly right. You want to know, people ask on the board what Heupel and Rodney and I talked about, and 100% we talked about Heupel's house redo. We talked about Hocus shoes for Rodney. We talked about Nick and Jay's. We talked about several things, but one instance was Heupel talking about one of the receivers cut a wheel route off that would have went for a touchdown, and had that not been the case, it probably is 6 points. So I think that's the point. It's like, it's not just Joe. Yes, he was critical of Joe. He was critical of Joe after the game. He was critical of Joe on Monday when we met with him. And I'm sure, again, he'll drive that point home when we hear from him later this morning. But on the whole, I think it's a combination of everything, and Joe's a part of it, but so are the receivers. So are, I think, a little bit offensive line, but mostly receivers and quarterback.
And we'll see how much they can get in sync going against a Pittsburgh team that's going to play a ton of man-to-man press coverage and dare you to beat them down the field until you prove that you can do it. Which, when those opportunities present himself, Robbie's got to be more accurate this week than he was last week with a deep ball for sure.
Before we go to the next question, I will say this: I'm interested to see, because let's face it, Pittsburgh's going to get home. They're gonna be on top of him a lot more than Bowling Green ever was. He had too much time last week, and I think that might have been to his detriment. What's he like this week? Does he make mistakes when he's forced to throw it a little bit faster, or does that help him? I mean, I think everybody's going to go, well, he'll probably make mistakes, but you don't know that. I mean, we'll see what happens when that happens on Saturday.
Well, he's interesting, and we'll see how it is against, obviously better competition. I mean, this is a guy who threw for 300 yards twice, Rob, before he got hurt at Michigan. There are times he makes it look very easy, and then there are times he's out of rhythm. And the question is, what do you do to try to make sure he stays in rhythm? Because the first quarter, it was easy. I mean, he made it look really, really easy. And let's,
and let's not forget, first game in a new system with new coaches, and when he wasn't here in spring practice. And, I temper any of my criticism with that. And also, I do the PFF thing every week. And, sometimes I agree with what what the numbers are. Sometimes I kind of scratch my head. But I do think it's worth noting that the highest receiver grade for PFF was 56 for Jalen Hyatt.
I think the point that Hubs made, and I know we got to get to more questions, but I know the point Hubs made earlier in the week about the fact they didn't scrimmage. Now, I know they did some 11-on-11 work and practice, but they didn't have a full-scale major scrimmage the 2 weeks leading up to that Thursday game. They basically went scrimmage 1, couple of days, scrimmage 2, and it was over after that. I just wonder if that played into it a little bit, just, knocking the rust off. Maybe it didn't. We'll find out on Saturday, but to me, it's at least an interesting notion.
Deshaun 13 wants to know, did your season predictions change after game 1? The answer to that for me is no.
No. I mean, as Rob just said, it would be to me poor to judge Joe Milton off of last Thursday, much like it would be poor to judge Joe Milton had he went for 340 yards and 80 yards on the ground and combined for 5 touchdowns. I just don't think you can judge anybody off one game. Look at DeAndre Johnson a year ago. Hubs was the savior that first game. After that, DeAndre Johnson was more known for getting kicked out at Georgia.
Yeah, that's true. More known for penalties than he was anything else other than what he did in that opening game against South Carolina. So I wrote it in 10 things last week. Don't make a judgment. It is what it is. It all starts to count when you move into week 2 and you go against better competition, and certainly Pitt is that. Volgrad 05 wants to know, can you give it a little more information on Byron Young? Is the worst case scenario that he sits for Pitt and then he's good, or could this wipe out the entire year for him?
No, he's back for Tennessee Tech. I don't think he's going to play this week. Maybe he'll miraculously win this appeal at the 11th hour, but to quote Brent on every Florida prediction known to man, I got to see it to believe it. I got to see him roll out there for warm-ups to believe he's going to play Saturday, but he is 157% back for Tennessee Tech.
And just my 2 cents, I love to throw shade on the NCAA anytime we can. I mean, how ridiculous is it? You've got Will Wade on tape, confirming he's buying players, and he's still collecting $4 million a year. Poor Byron Young plays 2 games at some junk prep school. And
it goes belly under, by the way.
Yeah, and the NCAA throws the hammer at. It's just ridiculous.
Well, and again, you don't know when you're going to get a ruling, if they're going to rule on anything this week. Supposed to, but they didn't work on Monday, and we'll see whenever that particular committee meets to whether or not they give any kind of ruling one way or the other. Let's go to the next one. I feel like this Pitt game is a significant game in the eyes of a lot of Tennessee fans, but do you think a win against Pitt would carry any weight outside of UT's bubble? Do you think recruits, national media would care that much about a win here? Bonus question, let's assume for a moment the 2024 Oklahoma game is getting scrapped in the spirit of other significant out-of-conference games like the Johnny Majors Classic, Battle for Bristol, reliving the Georgia Tech rivalry, etc. Name a Power 5 opponent you would love to see us play in place of Oklahoma. Any non-Power 5 teams you would also love to see Tennessee play. Let's talk about this first question. Is the win a big deal in the national media? No. But for Tennessee, is it significant? Yes.
Huge.
I think this is a big game.
Yeah,
go ahead, AP.
No, I was just going to say, it makes you 4-0 in non-conference play. Vanderbilt ain't beating Tennessee. They ain't beating ETSU. Who may turn around and lose to UVA Wise this week? You just never know. But to me, that's 5 for Tennessee. And then can Tennessee get a few out of South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri? I ultimately think Tennessee, if they win Saturday, it catapults them to 6-6 is the floor for the season.
I agree. I mean, it doesn't move the national needle at all. People aren't going to care about that. But yeah, it makes 7-5 a real possibility.
To answer the second question, I can go ahead and tell you. I think I told you, Brent, the other night when I was watching the game. I wish the Vols would go back to UCLA.
You just like that sissy blue is all you care about, AP. You like that sissy blue shirt, right?
I'm to several West Coast teams. Me and AP have both been on to Washington. A home there would be great. I'm with UCLA, USC. Tennessee's not played them. That was in the Eagles series 40 years ago.
Only two stadiums you can get to by water: Washington and Knoxville. So that one would make some sense. I'd love for them to play UCLA again. I just think that Pasadena is a neat place. I'd be for another Cal trip. Get the night tour at Alcatraz. I'd love for them to do a Notre Dame game. I'd love for them to do Boston College, especially if the game was later in the year and not early. I'd love to go to Boston when the leaves are changing. I can name a bunch, but specifically, I'd love to see them go out on the West Coast or go up into the Northeast.
Next one we go to, were you surprised that Pierce came in ahead of Whitehead at the end of the game? I would have expected him to be the fourth tailback, Whitehead being that. What is holding Morven Joseph back? Seems like he could have gotten some snaps in the second half. They didn't play a ton of reps. Really, when you look at the second half, Rob, there wasn't that many possessions for Bowling Green, I don't think they went that far down the depth chart. Pierce is a guy that Jerry Mack spoke glowingly about in his media conference a couple of weeks ago. That kind of caught everybody off guard, but he had good things to say about Pierce then. So I wasn't stunned that he was in there. I think the bigger question is, where are Beckwith, where are Whitehead? What does that rotation look like if Tennessee doesn't have everybody available in their running back rotation, for whatever game, out there? I think that's the bigger question. When it's not mop-up duty, who's the next tailback in?
It would be Whitehead.
You almost wonder if that was a reward for Pierce, doing the work in camp, doing the right things, and maybe also showing Whitehead and others that this is when you earn it on the playing field, this is what happens.
Just wait till spring, Rob. He's the next Kirsten Biggers.
As for who was the other one?
David Yancey.
There's one more. Who?
David Yancey.
How can I believe I forgot David Yancey? Shame on me.
As for Morven Joseph, I think it's consistency. And I don't think he's that far up the depth chart at this point with where they're at in their rotation. He's a guy that's still looking for a bit of a home. Is he going to be an edge guy in certain situations? Can he play in space? Is he more of an in-the-box guy as an inside linebacker? I think they're trying to figure out best uses for him in this defense. Ramrod 495, any chance of one of Willis, Garland, Morven Joseph, Mohan can start seeing some snaps ahead of Solon Page's snaps? Mohan was really good on special teams. Really good. I don't know if they're ready to translate into him doing anything at the linebacker position. He's a different type player than Page is. I mean, I think they like Page in space. We'll see. Those linebackers are going to get challenged this week across the middle of the football field with the tight end and some of the crossing stuff that Pitt runs. They're going to challenge those linebackers to be able to play in space. I don't think Aaron Willis is close to being ready to play at linebacker for Tennessee right now.
I agree.
That was one of the biggest surprises for me, going back and looking at all the numbers on Wednesday for the PFF piece. And I knew they played a lot, but Page and Beasley played 27 snaps. I mean, they pretty clearly had a rotation set, and I'll be very interested to see if that holds.
Yeah, I don't know that you'll see that kind of rotation this week. But, I think that was, as you mentioned, very definitely the plan going into. Heidelval wants to know, does it behoove Tennessee to take a second quarterback in 2022 class? If so, do you prefer a portal puppy or a high school kid? I think a portal guy is hard to get if if Joe Milton has a good year and is your quarterback, or if somebody takes the reins for this quarterback room who's not named Hendon Hooker, who's not a senior, who's got more eligibility, I don't know that a portal guy is going to be real interested in making a transfer to Tennessee if they have a, quote, established quarterback. So I think it would be a high school kid. Austin, with numbers, do you think Tennessee would take another high school kid?
I don't think so. I think that's one of those things where I think if you get to, February and, you're down to a couple of guys, you take a strong look at the portal at that point.
To hoops we go. Wallace will obviously not be scared off by anyone, but do you think Tennessee is pitching the depth chart at Kentucky versus Tennessee at his position? Or do you think it has an impact? Wallace's AAU teammate and nearby hometown friend, Kyron Lindsey, is now a priority for the Vols. You said, do you know how close he and Wallace are? And is that something as Tennessee is selling those two on playing together?
As for Wallace, no, I don't think he's scared by anybody Kentucky has committed. I don't think that's a huge factor. And from my understanding, he and Lindsey are friends, but I don't think either one of those guys, and I don't think very many prospects at all base their decision on what some AAU buddy is doing. I mean, these guys play with a ton of kids in the summertime. I mean, they're loaded AAU teams, especially the one, the program Wallace is coming out of. So in my opinion, I can't remember a time when Tennessee has gotten a kid based off of what one of his friends was doing. I mean, maybe I'm missing somebody in the last 2 decades. I've forgotten a lot, but I don't think that's ever the kind of factor that a lot of fans think.
Don't you think it's different too, Rob, now, even more now than it was years ago? Because, a lot of those guys, Wallace, I'm sure, is thinking, hey, I'm going to come play 30 games in college and I'm gone. So it's not like you're going to come, hey, let's go play together for 3 years and, build
have an
this
apartment
thing.
together. Have an apartment together when we're sophomores, be able to fly home together. They're not. Kassan Wallace and a bunch of these kids are thinking they're going to live in Knoxville for probably 7-8 months.
Yeah. Get here in the summertime and be gone. not going to be here a full year. Be gone as soon as the season's over.
You're done whenever you get bounced from the NCAA tournament. You don't go to another class.
All right. I know this is taken from one game, but Milton doesn't seem to have much of a knack for running. He looked okay on drawn-up running plays, but it didn't look natural for him whenever he took off and scrambled. Is this something that the staff could have overlooked in camp because he was in a red jersey? If Milton doesn't have the running ability that was expected from him, does he still have the highest ceiling in that quarterback room? What'd you make of his running skills on Thursday night?
I liked your point you made the other night, Hubbard. I was surprised at the lack of physicality. I thought he was fine as a runner. I was surprised when contact, and I'm not talking about taking on a 260-pound defensive end. When he gets to the second level and he's as big as the guys trying to tackle him, I was surprised that he tried to be evasive instead of just putting his shoulder down Cam Newton style and, getting 2 or 3 extra yards or even breaking the tackle.
Does the red jersey thing in fall camp, could that skew your outlook? Not that all of a sudden now he's not what we thought he was. He's not this, or he's not our guy. AP. I'm not talking about any of that, but is there such thing as getting a misread in some ways because he didn't take contact in fall camp, or you got tape on him at Michigan and everything else. Don't you think they probably knew what he was?
Yeah, I guess so. I think probably it's more of a hindrance to Hendon Hooker, the red jerseys are, than Joe Milton. You maybe can get I thought he would be a little more aggressive, instead of kind of just getting down and afraid to take a hit. But, Hooker, you can't really see his full game when you don't play live football with the quarterbacks. And at least that's my opinion. That was part of Dobbs' deal. Dobbs was never super accurate in practice. So I think everybody just kind of judged him when in reality he was just a playmaker. But you don't see that when you're wearing back then it was a green jersey. Now it's red.
Yeah, but the coaches don't see it, but I think the kids still have it. I think so much of that is instincts. Josh Dobbs was elusive and able to make plays out of the pocket and down the field as soon as he got on the field, despite wearing a green jersey. I bet Kyler Murray were whatever Oklahoma's version of the green jersey was.
But that's my point, though, is I'm talking about from the fact of when you're looking at who your quarterback should be, I think you're not seeing full Hendon Hooker because you're not playing.
We're not seeing it, but I'm saying I don't think having the green jersey on hinders Hendon Hooker once he gets in the game and he's live. I think he's just as good as whether or not he was taking contact in fall camp.
Right, but I think Austin's point is maybe it hinders the evaluation of.
I agree with that
on the practice field. Yeah, okay,
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I think there's probably, and it would hinder him more than another quarterback because his legs appears to be a bigger part of his game than the other quarterbacks are. Pine Mountain Vol wants to know, does UT have the advantage on the O-line and D-line versus Pitt? I don't think so. I mean, when you look at the experience of Pitt, I know, Rob, you've got the matchup piece coming up later today. I mean, that's a Pitt offensive line that started a bunch of games together. They're a bunch of grown men. They got a bunch of veterans on the defensive line.
I did the matchup piece is ready to go, and I looked at it. I mean, Pitt has a bunch of guys that have started, but they were also 110th in the NCAA last year in rushing the football. So they got a bunch of guys coming back, but they don't have a bunch of guys back that were very good in 2020. Their best running back's a true freshman, or at least their best running back in the opener was a true freshman. And I don't think Tennessee's as good up front as they showed against Bowling Green. But if they can just approach that level of play, I give the Tennessee defensive front an advantage.
Do you really?
Yes, I do. And again, I based that so much of in 2020, you've got 4 starters back, but those 4 starters averaged 119. They were 110th out of 129 teams running the football.
And is there also something to be said that this is an SEC defensive line versus a non-SEC defensive line? I mean, this league is about in the trenches, right? I mean, do you factor that into that viewpoint as well?
And flipping it, I think Pittsburgh's front 7. I'll throw the linebackers in there as well because I think they're nasty. I mean, they've got some dudes at linebacker. They got 2 fifth-year seniors. They've got a junior, and they played a lot of football. They played a lot of productive football. I think Tennessee could have some problems running the ball. We'll see.
So you're saying advantage Pitt D-line or defensive front, maybe advantage Tennessee defensive front against their offense.
Okay. And that's we've got a thin sample size, and I'm basing a ton of my opinion on what Pitt did last year on the ground when they were just not very good.
Well, and here's the thing is, Cooper Mays, I would call him super questionable at this point. So, I mean, I just think, if Carvin's the center, who are the guards? I mean, Spraggins didn't, set my hair on fire last week. And, Ollie Lane got better over the course of the game, but this isn't Bowling Green. So, do they give another guy a look? Is a guy like Kingston Harris going to get more run on Saturday? So that's, to me, that guard play, to Rob's point about, the Pitt defensive line could be a big determining factor on how much time Joe Milton does or does not have.
Well, and I think you've heard Josh Heupel mention this a couple of different times. You got to avoid third and long. Cade Mays talked about this on Tennessee Prime on Tuesday night, is that Pitt doesn't do a whole lot of unusual on first and second down. They kind of say, hey, here's who we are. This is our talent. We're coming at you. But if they can get you in third and long, they get pretty exotic and do some things where they cause you to have you can have a busted assignment in a hurry if you're not careful there. So I think who can mentally handle that part of it will go a long ways into who plays the most snaps for Tennessee on the offensive line on Saturday.
Yeah. And Hubbard, Pitt has 2 linebackers that combined for 23 TFLs last year.
Yeah, they play at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they are downhill for sure because they play so much press man on the outside at corner that they're not going to ask those linebackers to play in space. They play really downhill, particularly in the run game or on run downs. CD Vol wants to know best opposing team you've ever seen play at Neyland Stadium. For me, personally, it was the 2002 Miami team. I think the 2 most talented teams to come into Neyland Stadium that I saw was that Notre Dame team in '90 that had Rocket Ismail and the Bus and Chris Zorich and all those guys, and then that 2002 Miami team.
You wouldn't throw any of the last couple Alabama teams that have rolled in here?
Well, yeah, okay. Maybe that's just because I'm used to them having some.
I agree. Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction is to say 02 Miami.
Yeah.
When you look at them, After it's all said and done, 0-2 Miami because of all the Hall of Famers that were on that, on that team. I mean, again, it's easier to sit back now 20 years later and say 0-2 Miami.
Because here's
what will those Alabama teams be 20 years from now or 15 years from now? Like the last 4 or 5 years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's easy right now to go 0-2 Miami. Because, I mean, those guys have,
they got gold jackets and bust. Yeah. I mean, because you're right.
08, I mean, 08 Wyoming. Juggernaut team.
There's some. I mean, obviously we'll see how those Alabama teams perform. I mean, but Derrick Henry's pretty good when he came to town. That was a pretty good team that Alabama rolled in that day. I'd have to go back and see that there's a bunch of NFL players off of those teams as well. So you got to put them in there somewhere.
Ken Dorsey is too a pretty big edge to Bama.
Yeah, no doubt. There's certainly some Alabama teams that would factor into that bill. So. But I guess that 2002 team stands out because that was when Tennessee was, quote, good, and they were uncompetitive. Whereas more recently, Tennessee's uncompetitive against Alabama, but Tennessee's, quote, down. That was not the downturn for Tennessee when that Miami team rolled in here in 2002.
Was it the first play of the game when Cedric Houston broke loose
and got tackled?
Got tackled at the 2. Tennessee didn't get it in.
And everybody and went, this is going to be a long day here. And it absolutely was. All right, Matt Brad 1 wants to know, you guys have mentioned quite a bit that Rodney Garner is personally recruiting Walter Nolan. Haven't really heard him mentioned with a lot of other recruits other than Jones, the D-line from Georgia that Tennessee seems to have cooled on. What other prospects is Rodney Garner focused on at this point in this class?
Nigel Kelly, Jacarius Clayton, who's a Mississippi State commit, DeAndre Martin. Those are a couple of other guys besides Walter Nolan that he's taking a hard look at. Ultimately, depending on whether they land Walter and what they do with a couple of those names I just mentioned, will be a determining factor whether they go dip into the portal again for defensive linemen. But I mean, Tennessee doesn't lose a ton of D linemen this year. They'll lose Tremblay and they'll lose Matthew Butler and they'll lose Latrell Bumpus. But, a lot of these other kids will be back. So, I think it's important to note, Tennessee still feels good about Jordan Phillips. Although, again, as I said earlier, anytime a kid's taking visits, it kind of gets dicey, in my opinion. So that one will be a fight to the finish line. But as you would expect, if the kid's good, the SEC team that's closest to him is going to take a swing at him, and it'll be up to Rodney Garner and Tennessee to try to hold on to him between now and December.
And we'll see exactly how the rest of those things shake. I just think they're going to be in the portal. I think you'll see them back in the portal at that position.
The more that Tremblay and DJ Terry and some of these portal guys play and have success, it makes it real convenient to want to go to that way. You know what I mean? Like if these guys don't have success this year, then maybe you rethink that. But if they're a big part of your football team, why not go right back in that same direction?
Yeah, and again, Rob, if you can get a guy who's got some development already, who's played, but he's got multiple years of eligibility left, it makes a ton of sense to go live in the portal and fill some gaps in the portal if you can.
I agree 100%. The key, like you said, with the one-time transfer rule and being able to get guys like Terry that have multiple years of eligibility left, it's a dream scenario for a team like Tennessee trying to rebuild the roster.
Yeah, for sure. Last time Heupel played Pitt, we got 2 questions left here. Last time Heupel played Pitt, he lost by 1 point. In the fourth quarter, he had a 4th and 2 from somewhere well within field goal range, maybe even in the red zone, but he went for it. They did not pick up the first and wound up losing the game. So we will see if he has learned a lesson from that or if it's a simple indication of his aggression. Every situation's different. I don't know what that. I don't guess that's a question. I guess it's a statement there. I have no idea why he felt that way at that point in the game. And maybe he thought that they had they had a great play call there and they could put it away and they didn't. So who knows? You coach every game completely different. All right, TS 2340 is recruiting at an all-time low. Are we legitimately beating any good SEC schools for players?
Well, on the whole, yeah. I won't say all-time low, but it is much harder to become a factor with kids, you know, when you're getting the investigation and other stuff used against you. So I think this 2022 class is always going to be has always been one that's an uphill road. The 2023s, I mean, I think they're ahead of the game with guys like, Caleb Herring, and a few other ones in state. But I just again, the 2022 class was always going to be a tough road when Tennessee decided to make a change in late January, not hire a coach for another couple of weeks after they had to hire an AD. Then that coach took over a month to fill out his entire staff. I mean, they just got behind the eight ball. Simple as that.
Year zero, AP year zero.
You're -1.
And that's why you're going to see Tennessee, and you continue to see Tennessee obviously focus a lot on 23s. We'll see who's in town this weekend. We'll have more on recruiting in the war room coming up tomorrow in terms of possible visitors who might be in town, who might not be in town. Plenty of other things coming up as well. That's going to do it for this edition of the Mailbag Podcast. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget, check out our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics for all of your natural organic health needs. That's SmokyMountainOrganics.com, 4 locations to serve you. That's going to do it for this edition. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.